August 14, 1944, a desolate patch of the North Atlantic. The world is a shifting canvas of gray. Gray sky, gray water, the gunmetal gray of the USS General George W. Goethals, a troop transport pushing its way west through an endless, indifferent swell. For 3 weeks, this has been the entire universe for the 2,200 souls crammed within its hull. For most, they are American soldiers, sailors, and airmen heading home on rotation, their minds filled with thoughts of Main Street, hot meals, and soft beds. But for a small, segregated group of 73, home is a place they may never see again. They are German prisoners of war, a strange human cargo of infantrymen, U-boat crewmen, and a handful of female auxiliaries captured in the whirlwind collapse of the front in Normandy. Among them is Ilse Richter. She is 22 years old, a former Luftwaffe Helferin, a signals operator whose world of coded messages and crackling radio transmissions ended abruptly in a ditch outside St. Lo. Now her world has shrunk to the size of a triple-tiered bunk, the smell of boiled cabbage and disinfectant, and the constant rhythmic groan of the ship's engines. She huddles on the deck, a thin wool blanket pulled tight around her shoulders, her gaze fixed on the churning foam in the ship's wake. The wind is a living thing out here, a relentless thief that steals the warmth from your body and the hope from your heart. It whips strands of her pale blonde hair across her face, stinging her eyes with salt spray. You can feel the vibration of the ship through the soles of your shoes, a deep, resonant hum that never ceases. It is the sound of limbo. Ilse watches the American guards. They are young, impossibly so, boys from places she can't even pronounce: Ohio, Texas, Pennsylvania. They carry their M1 Garand rifles with a casual authority, their faces betraying a mixture of boredom and deep-seated weariness. One of them, a private first class with kind eyes and a jawline still soft with youth, catches her looking. He doesn't glare or sneer. He just gives a slight, almost imperceptible nod, then turns his attention back to the horizon. His name is Frank Miller. He's 19, a farm boy from outside Cincinnati, and he hates the ocean. He hates the cold, the damp, and the endless rocking that keeps his stomach in a permanent state of unease. He is guarding enemies of the state, women who wore the same uniform as the men who killed his friends. Yet, looking at this girl, all he sees is someone's daughter, looking just as lost and miserable as she feels. The ranking NCO in charge of their detail, Sergeant Davis, is a different man entirely. Older, harder, a career soldier with a face like a roadmap of every dreary army post from Fort Dix to Schofield Barracks. For Davis, the prisoners are not people, they are inventory. His job is to get them from point A to point B without incident. Rules, regulations, and the chain of command are his gospel. He paces the deck, his boots making a hard, rhythmic clap on the steel plates, a constant reminder of who is in control. He sees Miller's subtle nod and his eyes narrow. Fraternization is a word he uses often, his voice like gravel in a can. Ilse understands none of their words, but she understands the tone. The rigid authority of the sergeant, the bored indifference of most of the guards, the quiet flicker of something else in the young private's eyes. Her indoctrination had painted these men as brutes, gangsters, degenerate capitalists. The reality is far more mundane, and in its own way, more terrifying. They are just men, and she is completely at their mercy. She pulls the blanket tighter, the coarse wool scratching her chin. The cold isn't just in the air. It's a deep internal chill that has taken root in her soul since the day of her capture. She closes her eyes, trying to remember the warmth of the sun on her face in the garden behind her family's home in Hamburg. But the memory is faint, a faded photograph from another lifetime. The only reality is the lurch of the deck beneath her, the shriek of the wind, and the vast, cold emptiness of the Atlantic Ocean. A voice crackles over the ship's loudspeaker, a tinny, distorted American accent. The words are lost in the wind, but the change in the guard's posture is immediate. They straighten up, their boredom replaced by a new alertness. Sergeant Davis barks an order, and the prisoners are herded to their feet. Something is happening. The long, monotonous voyage is about to be broken.
The destination is not a harbor. There is no sight of land, no welcoming statue, no bustling docks. The horizon remains an unbroken line separating the slate-gray sea from the bruised purple sky. Instead, another vessel materializes out of the haze, smaller, leaner, and far less stable. It's a landing craft infantry, an LCI, its flat bottom and shallow draft making it dance and slap against the waves. It pulls alongside the massive transport, looking like a toy boat next to a giant. The transfer is to happen here, in the open ocean. A new set of orders, a change in their final destination. They are being moved to a different processing camp, and this smaller ship is their ride. For the prisoners, a new kind of fear takes hold. The transport, for all its misery, was a fortress of steel. It felt solid, permanent. This new craft looks fragile, temporary, at the complete mercy of the churning Atlantic. A carbo net is unfurled down the side of the Gothals, followed by a Jacob's ladder, a crude rope ladder with wooden rungs. This will be their bridge between the two worlds. The gap between the ships is a maelstrom of white water. As the LCI rises on a swell, its deck comes perilously close to the hull of the transport. As it falls, a terrifying chasm of green, angry water opens up between them. The transfer begins. The male prisoners go first, their faces grim. Each man has to time his move, to leap from the deck of the transport, grab the swinging ladder, and scramble down as quickly as possible before the ships either collide or drift too far apart. American sailors shout instructions, their voices sharp and urgent. Go, go now, move it. Sergeant Davis stands at the railing, his face a mask of grim efficiency, ticking off names on a clipboard as each prisoner makes the perilous crossing. You can hear the grunts of effort, the sickening thud of a misstep, as a man's foot slips, his body saved only by his desperate grip on the ropes. The wind howls, snatching at their loose-fitting clothes, trying to tear them from their precarious hold. PFC Frank Miller is positioned halfway down the deck, his job to keep the remaining prisoners in line. He watches the transfer with a knot in his stomach. This feels wrong, reckless. One mistake, one rogue wave, and a man could be crushed between the two steel hulls, or simply vanish into the freezing water. He sees the fear on the faces of the German women as their turn approaches. They are not soldiers trained for this. They are clerks, nurses, telephone operators. Their hands are pale and soft, not calloused and strong like the infantrymen who went before them. Now it is Ilse Richter's turn. She stands at the precipice, her knuckles white as she grips the icy railing. The blanket is gone, leaving her in her thin uniform jacket, which offers no protection from the biting wind. She looks down at the ladder, swaying like a pendulum over the churning sea. The wooden rungs are slick with salt spray. The drop looks immense, a fall into nothingness. A guard prods her forward. Come, schnell, he barks, using one of the few German words he knows. She takes a deep breath, the cold air burning her lungs. She can feel the eyes of everyone on her, the prisoners behind her, the American sailors on both ships. Sergeant Davis looks up from his clipboard, his expression impatient. Let's go, Fraulein. We don't have all day. The title is not meant as a courtesy. It is a dismissal. Ilse puts a foot over the side, her worn leather shoes struggling to find purchase on the top rung. Her hands, numb with cold, reach for the stiff, coarse rope. It feels alien, hostile. She launches herself away from the relative safety of the deck, her entire weight now suspended over the abyss. The ladder swings violently as a wave pushes the LCI away. For a terrifying second, she is hanging in open space. Her heart hammers against her ribs. She forces herself to move, one hand, one foot, then the other. The motion is clumsy, panicked. The ship's hull is a sheer cliff of riveted steel beside her. Below, the LCI's deck rises and falls with a sickening speed. Sailors stand with arms outstretched, ready to grab her, but they seem a world away. Miller watches from above, his own hands clenched into fists. He feels a primal urge to shout something, a word of encouragement, but the discipline holds him in check. He can only watch as the small, lone figure makes her desperate descent into the heart of the chaos. The rhythm is all wrong. She's moving too slowly, fighting the ladder instead of moving with it. Another wave, larger this time, is building, a dark wall of water rolling toward the two ships.
The wave hits like a battering ram. It slams into the hull of the USS General George W. Goethals, sending a shudder through the entire ship. A curtain of ice-cold spray erupts upwards, drenching everything and everyone on the deck. For Ilse Richter, suspended on the Jacob's ladder, the impact is catastrophic. The ladder is violently whipped sideways, the wooden rungs smashing against the steel plates of the hull. The shock travels up her arms, a painful jolt that breaks her already tenuous grip. There is a single, horrifying moment of weightlessness. Time seems to stretch and distort. The shouts of the sailors become a distant, muffled roar. The gray sky and the gray sea spin in a dizzying vortex. Her fingers scrabble for a hold, but there is only slick, wet rope. And then she is falling. The descent is short, a mere 15 or 20 feet, but it feels like an eternity. She sees a flash of upturned faces on the LCI's deck, their mouths open in silent screams. She hits the water not with a clean dive, but with a clumsy, sprawling impact that knocks the breath from her lungs. The cold is absolute.
It is not just a sensation, it is a physical blow, a stunning, paralyzing force that seizes every muscle in her body. It is colder than any winter she has ever known, a cold that feels malevolent, alive. The heavy wool of her uniform and her leather boots instantly become an anchor, dragging her down. She flails, her arms and legs refusing to obey her commands. Panic, pure and primal, floods her mind, erasing all thought, all reason. Her head breaks the surface, and she gasps, but instead of air, she swallows a mouthful of bitter, briny water. It burns its way down her throat, triggering a violent coughing fit that only pulls her under again. On the decks of the two ships, there is a frozen moment of collective shock. For a half second, everyone just stares at the spot where she disappeared, a spreading circle in the turbulent water. Then chaos erupts. Sailors are shouting, pointing. On the transport, Sergeant Davis roars an order. Hold the line, nobody moves, maintain positions. His training, his entire worldview is screaming at him, security first. The prisoners are a flight risk, the situation must be controlled. He is not running a rescue service, he is managing hostile assets. But PFC Frank Miller isn't listening to Sergeant Davis. He is listening to the sound of his own heart pounding in his ears. He sees her head bob to the surface again, her face a pale blur of terror. He sees her mouth form a word, a desperate cry carried on the wind, a sound that cuts through the noise of the waves and the shouting men. It's a sound that transcends language and uniform. Ich ertrinke. Her German is choked, desperate, but her meaning is universal. Then a second later, in broken, panicked English, a phrase she must have learned somewhere, sometime, for just this moment. I'm drowning. The words hit Miller like a physical strike. This isn't an enemy. This isn't a Fraulein or prisoner number on a manifest. It's a terrified young woman, the same age as his sister, about to die in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, while 20 armed men watch. The conflict inside him lasts for less than a heartbeat. Duty versus decency. Orders versus instinct. He doesn't even think. He acts. He shoves his M1 Garand into the hands of a stunned soldier next to him. Take this, he grunts, already kicking off his heavy combat boots. He tears at the buckle of his web belt, letting the canteen and ammo pouches clatter to the deck. Sergeant Davis sees the movement, and his face contorts with fury. Miller, what in the hell do you think you're doing? Get back in formation. That's a direct order. Miller ignores him. He is already at the railing, his eyes locked on the struggling form in the water. He knows the cold. He knows the statistics. In water this temperature, you have minutes, maybe less, before hypothermia renders you helpless. She is already going under for the third time. There is no more time for debate. With one last look at the churning chaos below, he takes a deep breath and vaults over the railing.
Frank Miller hits the water with a concussive shock that drives the air from his body in a single, painful burst. The cold is a physical assault, a million icy needles stabbing into his skin. For a moment, his vision whites out, his limbs turning to lead. The sheer, breathtaking violence of the temperature is beyond anything he could have imagined. His army-issue wool trousers and shirt, now saturated, cling to him like a shroud, dragging him down. He fights the instinct to gasp, knowing that to inhale water is to die. Kicking furiously, he powers his way back to the surface, his head breaking into the frigid air. He shakes the water from his eyes, his gaze sweeping the waves, searching. There, a flicker of movement 10 yards away. It's Ilsa. She is barely conscious, her flailing weaker now, her body succumbing to the cold. Miller starts swimming, his strokes clumsy and powerful, a frantic crawl born of pure adrenaline. The swell lifts him high on a crest, then drops him into a trough, the ships momentarily disappearing from view. He is alone with the girl and the ocean. Back on the LCI, Miller's impulsive act has broken the spell of inaction. A young corporal from Boston named O'Malley, without a word, sheds his own gear and dives in after him. 2 more soldiers follow. Suddenly, it is no longer a military operation. It is a desperate human rescue. Sergeant Davis stands on the deck of the transport, his face a thunderous mask of disbelief and rage. His authority has evaporated. But even he is not immune to the unfolding drama. His instinct to control the situation shifts. He can't stop the men in the water, but he can help them. "Get some lines," he bellows, his voice now a tool of rescue, not just command. "Get me some goddamn ropes over the side, now." Miller reaches Ilsa. She sees him coming, but her eyes are wide with panic, not relief. As he gets close, she lunges for him, her survival instinct taking over. This is the moment every lifeguard dreads. A drowning person does not cooperate. They climb. She grabs onto him, her fingers like claws, forcing him under. He swallows a mouthful of salt water, choking, and for a terrifying second, he thinks they will both go down together. He has to break her grip. Using a technique he learned as a boy in the local river,
He lets himself sink, then twists, pushing her away just enough to get his head clear. "Ruhig," he yells, the German word for calm coming from some forgotten war film. "I'm here to help you." O'Malley and the other soldiers reach them, forming a small, struggling cluster in the immense ocean. They work together, one grabbing Ilsa under the arms, another supporting her head, keeping her face out of the water. Miller, now free, treads water, trying to conserve what little energy he has left. His body has begun to shake uncontrollably, the first violent tremors of hypothermia setting in. He can feel the strength draining from his limbs, the cold creeping into his core. Above them, sailors and soldiers are leaning far over the railings of both ships, heaving coils of rope. The first one lands a few feet away. Miller lunges for it, his numb fingers struggling to close around the thick, wet hemp. He gets a grip. He works the end of the rope under Ilsa's arms, his hands clumsy and slow. She is barely conscious now, a dead weight in the water. O'Malley helps him secure the knot. "Got her!" he shouts, his voice hoarse. "Pull! Pull!" The line goes taut. Slowly, agonizingly, the sailors on the LCI begin to haul them in. The journey of 30 feet back to the ship is a brutal fight against the drag of the water and the pull of the waves. Miller and the other rescuers cling to the rope, their bodies battered against the steel hull. They are a human chain, a fragile link of defiant warmth in the freezing, merciless Atlantic. A dozen hands reach down from the deck of the LCI as they draw near. They grab Ilsa's limp body first, pulling her over the railing and onto the hard safety of the deck. Then they reach for her rescuers, one by one, hauling the exhausted, shivering American soldiers from the sea that had so nearly claimed them all. Miller is the last one out. He collapses onto the steel plates, his body shaking so violently his teeth chatter like castanets. He lies there, gasping, the world a blurry, tilting mess. But he is alive. And so is she.
The engine room of the LCI is a world of suffocating heat and noise. The rhythmic thrum of the diesel engines is a deafening, constant heartbeat. The air is thick with the smell of oil and hot metal. It is here, in this grimy, mechanical womb, that they bring them. Ilsa Richter lies on a makeshift bed of canvas tarps, wrapped in layers of coarse, gray navy blankets. PFC Frank Miller and the other 3 soldiers sit nearby, similarly swaddled, their wet uniforms piled in a corner. A medic moves between them, forcing mugs of scalding, sweet coffee into their trembling hands. No one speaks. The roar of the engines makes conversation impossible, but the silence between them is deeper than just the absence of sound. It is a silence filled with the weight of what has just happened. Ilsa lies with her eyes closed, her body racked with shivers that have nothing to do with the cold anymore. She is replaying the events in her mind, a dizzying, terrifying loop. The fall, the crushing cold, the panic, the certainty of death. And then the face of the young American guard, appearing through the gray water, his expression not of hatred or contempt, but of grim, focused determination. He had a choice. Every man on that deck had a choice. The sergeant had given an order. The easiest thing, the safest thing, the required thing, was to let her drown. She was the enemy. Her death would have been a regrettable but acceptable casualty of war, a footnote in a logbook. Instead, he had thrown away his weapon, disobeyed a direct order, and plunged into the lethal cold of the Atlantic. 3 others had followed. They had risked their own lives, without hesitation, for hers. Slowly, she opens her eyes. Across the cramped space, she sees him. Miller is staring into his coffee mug, but his gaze is distant. He looks pale, exhausted, and still impossibly young. He feels her looking and lifts his head. Their eyes meet. In that moment, the entire artifice of the war, the uniforms, the flags, the ideologies, the years of propaganda, dissolves into meaninglessness. She is not Luftwaffe-Helfer and Ilsa Richter, and he is not Private First Class Frank Miller of the United States Army. They are simply 2 human beings, stripped down to their most essential form by the brutal indifference of the ocean. 2 people who have shared a terrifying brush with mortality. She sees in his eyes not pity, not pride, but a profound and simple weariness. The weariness of a boy forced to be a man, of a farmer forced to be a soldier, of someone who has seen too much death and for once had the chance to choose life. She gives a small, almost imperceptible nod. It is all the thanks she can offer. He acknowledges it with a slight dip of his chin, a silent message that needs no translation. You're welcome. It was the only thing to do. Later, there will be consequences. Sergeant Davis will file a report, a carefully worded document that both condemns Miller for insubordination and grudgingly recommends him for a commendation, a paradox that perfectly captures the military's confusion when confronted with raw humanity. The story will become a strange minor legend on the ship, spoken of in hushed tones.
But for Ilsa, it is more than a story. It is a fundamental rewiring of her soul. The world she knew, a world of clear lines between friend and foe, good and evil, has been irrevocably shattered. In its place is something far more complex, more frightening, and ultimately more hopeful. She is still a prisoner on her way to an unknown fate in a hostile land, but she is no longer captive to the hatred that fueled the war. In the freezing waters of the Atlantic, in the split-second decision of a young enemy soldier, she had been saved in more ways than one. She had been given back her life, and in the process, she had been given a glimpse of a world where mercy was not a weakness, but the strongest force of all.